Unfortunately, you probably already know the story of Turtle Rock Studios' potentially biggest project and largest letdown. From Expo Darling, expert marketing, and monstrous following to Day 1 DLC, season passes, dead community, and the fall into free-to-play that turned into a fallout of fans, obscurity, and irrelevance. But that isn't the story I want to tell today. I'm not even going to really dig into my own personal journey and ultimate disappointment with what was once one of my favorite games of all time. I want to tell the story that most people don't even know, or didn't pay attention to, the one thing that could still be a redeeming factor for the choices that were made with this title. The lore and story of Evolve. Let's start on the ground floor. The story that was told over and over. In fact, it was plastered on every advertisement and commercial so much that it became sickening. Many years in the future, humans have found ways to colonize on planets outside of our solar system, one of which planets being Shear, in the far arm of space. As this progressed, humans begin to meet resistance from strange monsters with the ability to evolve into great and more terrifying forms. An organization named NORDITA assembled a crew of the galaxy's best hunters. That is essentially all you are explicitly ever told, and yes, it's not wildly interesting or original, so allow me to dig in. William Cabot, the team's captain, is the man NORDITA employed to come out of retirement and save Shear. With a history of taming planets in the far arm as captain of an organization called Leading Edge, he was the prime candidate for the job. He wears a Soul Guard Air Agency bomber jacket with a Hub Marshal's Service Fugitive Task Force patch on the shoulder. Although most of these smaller details on each of the hunters have little information recorded within Evolve, it's theorized that the Soul Guard are the military faction in cosmic protection of the original solar system. We also know that what brought Cabot to the Far Arm in the first place is tracking down a man named Arthur Rank, and even though we don't know exactly what for, it seems to align with his badge. Cabot's second in command through most of his life is his pilot, robot, and fellow hunter, Bucket, also a Hub Marshal of which was assigned to partner with Cabot in the year 2356. Little is known about Bucket's origins, other than he was programmed on Earth and activated on Ganymede. Another member of the Hub's army is Hyde. He, on the other hand, did not join the military so eagerly. Hyde grew up on Mercury with a low-class poor upbringing along the dregs of society, leading him into a life of crime. He was given a choice: prison time or enlist, and many years later he would become one of the few veterans of all three mutagen wars, a series of conflicts between the Sol Hub, the human government centered on Earth, and the rebels of the outside colonies. The government experimented with extended weaponry, one of which projects was referred to as chemtroopers, employing a specific compound of fiery destruction, and Hyde was one of the most notable because of his refusal to wear a filter mask. Another of the tactics developed by the Sol Hub during the Mutagen Wars were the Lazarus Men. For a hefty price, the Celestial Materials Extraction and Transport Company developed the Thanatologists, a group of about 1,000 soldiers equipped to bring anyone back from the dead, but following the Trilogy of Wars, the Lazarus device itself was deemed illegal. Because of his refusal to give up on the science behind the device, and because it massively intrigued him, Lazarus fled from the Hub, of which he was a citizen on Io, and lived as a renegade to perfect his craft. On the other side of the war was Slim. Once a normal human, he was tricked by the rebellion to be modified into a partial insect experiment to fight for the resistance. He was told that once the war was over, it would be safe to revert back to his former self, but this wasn't the case. In fact, upon defeat, the Hubble forces outlawed and subsequently tracked down, executed every Basilisk soldier like him, although his modifications have granted him a second set of lungs for CO2 recycling, and an exoskeleton that allows him to live in the void of space. The Season 4 medic is the last of his kind. Slim, after escaping into the Far Arm, stumbled onto Shear, another resident of which was a former Celestial Survey agent, a person employed to observe planets on level not conducive to satellites. Crow chose to stay on Shear after his retirement, and this was really the end of his story until one day he stumbled upon tracks of a creature he had never encountered, and after 3 days confronted none other than Slim. With no reason to turn him in, they ended up living together, hunting the rising number of large beasts on Shear prior to the team's assembly. There's another hunter known for genetic modification, although this time by choice. Kala is a secret Celestial Corporation microbiologist, and because she was the foremost expert of the monster race, she only trusted herself to attempt and successfully transplant Kraken DNA with her own being. It led to her deformed arm and eye and the ultimate fear that eventually the monster within could take over. At this point, you've heard about chem troopers, but there was also another failed experiment at the hands of the Soul Guard called Rage Troopers. Because of the high risk to the wearer, this special set of adrenaline-infused suits were declared a failure and all destroyed except for one. Parnell kept his suit in secret storage until after he left the Soul Guard and became a mercenary and eventually go on to serve as commander of a ship called the Sword. During a mission to defend Sapphire Station, a colony in the Sirius star system, the Sword came under fire by a prototype stealth ship of the hub called the Solaris. With the Sapphire Station taking drastic measures in the name of self-defense, the Solaris was set into a dive towards the central star, Sirius A. Following a noble cause, the members of the Sword sought to save the crew of the Solaris before its destruction, but to no avail. The Solaris entered a critical state and exploded, leaving Parnell in a 3-week coma and Sonny, the 16-year-old prodigy pilot, presumed dead. While Abe was a cynical technician and usually a selfish man, he refused to allow Sonny to join the crew of the Sword because she was too young. She had left her home at the age of 14 to join a Celestial-run deep space ore shifting team and stretch her piloting skills. At some point, she heard word of the Sword, challenged its flight simulation test, and landed a position on the crew. Sonny was known to be exceptionally smart, and reading the signs of imminent danger, actually slipped into a stasis pod and escaped in the nick of time aboard the Solaris. Where else would she land 6 months later upon waking up but Shear? Another hunter would also find themselves miraculously winding up on Shear. As Chief Technical Officer of Ebenstar with a specialty in robotics, Torvald was one of the crew members responsible for transporting a monster in secret. Of course, that was never going to go according to plan, and when it escaped its containment, it killed most of the crew, and Torvald within an inch of his life. He used the robots on board to rebuild his limbs within machinery, and forced the ship to crash land on the surface of Shear, allowing the monster to flee until he recovered enough strength to hunt it down in revenge. Upon failing in this venture, he was left for dead at Broken Hill Foundry, when Sonny found him attempted to heal his wounds. Eventually, Sonny and Torvald would cross paths with Crow and Slim. One of the first introduced hunters, Markov, was born on Mars, but renounced his hub citizenship when he went to become an orbital welder as evidenced by the suit he wears, with a dream to get out to the Sterling colony. It struck up a large amount of borium, an extremely valuable cosmic element, and the corporations of the system hired mercenaries to go and forcefully take control over the colonies and mine the minerals themselves, leaving survivors, of which there were few, left running away in fear if they could afford it. As a result of this devastation, Markov vowed to never let such a thing happen and became a mercenary himself. Hank was simply an heir to a mining and demolition company on Mercury and left the planet just to have fun. Val, a sniper, spy, and medic, is actually a member of Sig-6, an intelligence agency that tasked her with collecting information on the fishy NORDITA company and its Shear colony. Although this was meant to be done in secret, she purposefully blew her cover to the crew in order to gain their trust. Griffin was a famous hunter, a celebrity icon of sorts and media darling, with films and comics based on him that sold in many systems. Kyra is the only hunter from Earth, and when she left to join the Celestial Advanced Survey Team, her parents disowned her and forbid her from accessing their massive wealth. Not so privileged, Maggie was born on a colony named Factor, which was also overrun by monsters, and although NORDITA attempted to evacuate the planet, they deemed it unprofitable when too many ships crashed on the surface. Most of the survivors were slain while trying to live within this wreckage for almost 2 years, until Maggie repaired one of the ships and left. Her interesting pet, Daisy, is a trapjaw that she bought at puppy size and raised, most notably through her teens when she and a gang of hooligans called themselves the Trapjaws, from which she presumably has her tattoos. The final 3 hunters are actually somewhat of a family. Jack, the 15-year-old whiz kid, has survived on Shear by assembling and concocting experimental technology from scrapyard materials to fight monsters under the vigilante persona of the Jackal. Presumably Jack's absentee mother or possibly grandmother, Ida, built her own armor as well from a celestial magma diver's suit and modify it to become a revenge machine. Also, with engineering ability at an outstanding level, she's admitted to designing the Broken Hill Mine, most of the structures on Shear, as well as a mobile asteroid base for NORDITA in her lifetime. Once an emergency medical evacuation technician, now referred to as Emmett, the last member of this family is a robot modified by Jack for combat. The interesting thing about the processor of Emmett is that it's made up of 2 core minds, the Reason Core and the Demon Core. Where Reason is unaware that Demon exists, Demon actively sits and listens to the Reason Core, possibly waiting to take over control someday in a twisted multi-personality problem. This may seem all well and good, but where did these monsters suddenly come from? What role does NORDITA really play that Sig 6 warranted sending their best spy to investigate? We know that with the introduction of adaptation versions of many of the soldiers, that there is an extended story of the planet tamers on Shear, but not in what order or what to avail this leads them or the monsters. Most of these hunters are wanted criminals. Perhaps this is some sort of prison sentence disguised as a noble effort, or a trick to get them out of the frying pan and into the fire. The heroes are known to speculate on the happenings of Shear during combat, most notably on the Wraith Trap map, asking why a Wraith would so easily be captured by citizens and scientists. These are questions that will sadly probably never be answered or stories ever continued because of the poor decisions of the company providing it in the first place. It's still fun to theorize what could have been or what truly was, almost as fun as most people hoped the game itself would be. I'm Eric, and this was the lore and story of Evolve. Thanks for watching. If you didn't know, the Gameside, guys, is powered by Patreon, so if you liked this or any of our other videos, consider taking a peek at our page over there and donating a couple bucks. It could get your name in the credits of every one of our longer editorial style videos, get every video a day early, and even exclusive content, and so much more. We've got some cool stuff, so if you're feeling generous, think about it, we appreciate it. But just as much as we like donating, it's even better to watch and share with your friends.